between that love's sweetness and the fact of Moltke's Roman court life, his Modena home and family deserted, down to his death by the new plague of syphilis, and a last dreaming elegy in pure humanist Latin. As the Gothic landscape ripens in Lotto to Renaissance mood, Della Casa turns Petrarch's mystery to sensuous caress. O sonno, o della quieta, umida, ombrosa notte, placido figlio. Not even in Sydney, come sleep, O sleep, the certain knot of peace, had English quite refined such sounds, oblio dolce de male si gravi. Though Wyatt and Surrey too steep Petrarch in Renaissance shadow. Alas, so all things now do hold their peace, heaven and earth disturbed in no thing, the night's car the stars about doth bring, calm is the sea, the waves work less and less. From 1504 to 7, Raphael was blending Umbrian, Flemish, and Leonardo in what would hold its own for centuries as the ideal Madonna, a form of womanly grace, of which later artists might say, as Galeazzo di Tarsia did of Italy, membrando la fatal vostra beltate, remembering your fatal beauty. At the same time, the homophonic lauda melodized, as in Fogliano, a timeless Ave Maria. Humanism from the first had invoked eternal presences. 100 years before this Raphael portrait of Castiglione, Platonic courtier, Bruni had written of his chance to study with the Greek Chrysoloras. Thou mayest gaze on Homer, Plato, and Demosthenes, converse with them, and receive their admirable doctrine. So Machiavelli, exiled to his farm, writes 1513 to Vettori, how after a day of snaring thrushes, doing chores, reading by a spring, gabbling with rustics at the inn, when evening comes, I return home and go into my study. On the threshold I strip off my muddy, sweaty workday clothes and put on the robes of court and palace. And in this graver dress I enter the antique courts of ancient men of old, where I am welcomed kindly, and taste the food which is mine alone, and for which I was born. I make bold to speak to them, and ask the motives of their actions, and they, in their humanity, reply to me. And for the space of 4 hours I forget the world and my cares, the troubles of poverty and the fear of death. I live again in their company. From their conversation I have composed a small book on principalities. Raphael's Parnassus and his school of Athens are the art actualizations of those immortals first seen by Dante in the noble castle of Limbo, their light conquering the hemisphere of darkness. And it was from later residence there that Rabelais' Gargantua, 1534, must have conceived the Abbey and Order of Theleme, its one clause and rule, do what thou wilt. Since men that are free, well-born, well-bred, have naturally an instinct and spur that prompteth to virtuous actions, and withdraws them from vice, and it is called honor. Upon the already elevated repose of the early century, and especially of Raphael, Michelangelo's mighty forms broke at the Sistine unveiling with undeflected challenge. Similarly, the ease of Italian harmony was entrained in the canonic rush of Josquin. The result in Raphael fills the later stanzas of the Vatican with muscled nudes, an Aeneas carrying Anchises, with other anomalies of a papal miracle when the old Vatican loggia burned. It was Festa in music who absorbed Josquin into the 1500 Italian, creating the high Roman style for which Palestrina has been disproportionately praised. In his last great works, whether the huge Transfiguration or this small cloud-born Ezekiel, the soft genius of Raphael ventures like Tansillo Icarus in the sonnet, scorning earth, I beat wings to the sky. E spreggio il mondo, e verso il ciel m'invio. Flaminio, who would have thought it possible, after such centuries of darkness, that so many lights should have arisen in a single time? The consciousness of Renaissance seizes even on the outmoded matter of chivalry, whether of Perseus or St. George, the Crusades or the peers of France, working it up in literature to the romantic epic. Pulcis Morgante was a giant, as Don Quixote would say, though disproportionate, affable, and well-bred. The Roland of Boiardo and Ariosto is a man, yet his love-mad actions in the Orlando Furioso are Quixote's giant model in the Morena, when those naked somersaults give Sancho more than he might report to Dulcinea. In England it is Spenser, Ariosto through a Protestant filter, the Red Cross Knight in the den of Error. She, wrapping up her wreathed stern around, leapt fierce upon his shield, and her huge train all suddenly about his body wound, that hand or foot to stir he strove in vain. God help the man so wrapped in Error's endless chain. If Spenser had looked for a picture to illustrate his fairy queen, he could hardly have found a better than Tintoretto's St. George, where the romance wonder of Ariosto becomes a moral allegory, like the defense of Una or truth from the fiend. And pointing forth, lo yonder is, said she, the brazen tower in which my parents dear, for dread of that huge fiend imprisoned be, whom I from far see on the walls appear. With that they heard a roaring hideous sound. 3 passion days the Red Cross Knight fights, wounds the brass-plated monster with his steel, but he's thrown down to rise recovered, first from the well of life and then from the tree. On the 3rd day transfixing the dragon through his hollow maw, so down he fell, and like an heaped mountain lay. From this billowing ground swell, as from Tasso's Jerusalem delivered, or the lute monodies of Galilee. To return to Ariosto is to enter a thaumaturgy of Gothic poignance in high Renaissance, the lute ricercare of the early 1500s, Capirola, Mantegna's last painting of virtue and the pool of vice, Orlando's dream of Angelica upon the Dante Petrarch flowered strand. He took such present pleasure in his dream as lovers feel possessing their desire. A moment only, then a tempest came and bore the flowers and leaves down heavy air. His love was lost there, and the bordered stream whelmed in dark and cloud and without reason, while he went up and down sounding her name, demanding of the echoing fields and forests, who has changed my sweetness into poison? And then he heard his lady, and she too cried. Weeping, she called upon him for his aid. He hurried to the sound. It shifted place. He turned again, still seeking back and forth, in bitter sorrow for his vanished solace. And then another voice came from the north, abandon hope of happiness on earth. At this appalling cry he wakes, he stirs, and finds himself, as in his dream, in tears. How could such magic fail to seed wonders over Europe? The natural life that had volleyed from Gothic north to Ars Nova south and come back north, enriched toward Renaissance, as with Chaucer or the first bird virelays of late 14th century France. That vigor ripening, as in Oswald von Wolkenstein, to the tenderness of Tyrolean heart.
Liri, 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 lon. So sang die Lerch, so sang die Lerch, so sang die Lerch. Ich sing hell ein Droschlein, ich sing hell ein Droschlein, ich sing hell ein Droschlein, das in dem Wald erklingt.
Dips south once more, and so returns to France in the space and robes of 1500, the frottlely chords and rhythms, to take in Janequin's 1528 Song of the Birds the gusto of Francis and Rabelais. Here is the nightingale couplet with an entrance of the refrain, while tapestry details hold the screen from the noble pastorals and the chase of the unicorn.
Oh, signor du bois, joli, à qui l'avoir raison, l'avoir raison, pour vous mettre votre gorge, mette
Grangousier's friends could not have warbled better over their cups. In the new kingdoms, feudal castles shed their walls, looking to the villas and gardened palaces of Italy. Compton Wynyates sets the mode in Henry VIII's England. the mullioned windowed hall in a wooded land, with church, farm, village, the great house built in the brick and half-timbering of the rural cot. A description of evening in Neville's Castle of Pleasure, 1518, restores that nature and mood. The night drew nigh, the day was at a side. My heart was heavy, I much desired rest, when without comfort alone I did abide, seeing the shadows fall from the hills in the west. Each bird under bough drew nigh to their nest. The chimneys from far began to smoke. Each householder went about to lodge his guest. The stork, fearing storms, took the chimney for a cloak. Curfew was rung, lights were set up in haste, which were plain precedents. The day was clearly past. France was more formal, and from Leonardo down more open to Italy. But the chateaux of the Loire were as close to forest and chase, fields and harvest, as the court poet Marot, in his 1539 Eclogue to the King, where he tells of his youth in that still wooded land. Villon's old cry of vanity, de ma jeunesse folle, here Renaissance affirmed. Sur le printemps de ma jeunesse folle, je ressens boire l'hirondelle qui vole, puis ça, puis là. Such the European blend of nature and custom that Spenser can describe his English boyhood by varying Marot, as Marot had learned from Florentine Poliziano. Nel vago tempo di sua verde etate viviasse lieto in pace e in libertate. Spenser. While I'm in youth, when flowered my joyful spring, like swallow swift I wandered here and there. I went the wasteful woods and forest wide, withouten dread of wolves to be espied. Even in the gilt and panelled galleries of Fontainebleau, the legends painted by Rosso Fiorentino, Primaticcio, dell'Abate, have absorbed, as from stream and forest, the freshness Spenser translated from Marot. Ô quelquefois aux arbres grimpé j'ai. How often have I scaled the craggy oak, all to dislodge the raven of her nest? How have I wearied with many a stroke the stately walnut tree, the whilst the rest under the tree fell all for nuts at strife, for alike to me was liberty and life, though the last line is Spenser's alone. And it is also at Fontainebleau that art cultivation of nature is expressed in a harvest landscape as real as Du Bellai's Song of the Wheat Winnower to the Winds, à vous trop légère, j'offre ces violettes. As Lang closes it, ah, winnow with sweet breath, winnow the holt and heath, round this retreat, where all the golden morn we fan the gold of the corn in the sun's heat. The new world did not simply offer itself, it was opened by the swelling prothalamion of that love. Against the bridal day, which is not long, sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song. In crusading chivalry, the battle joy of the North had refined itself into art. Israelites and Ammonites take the arms of Franks and Moors. Bertrand de Born had voiced that keenness in the poem's pound flung at an age weary of war. It pleaseth me to the heart when I see strong castles besieged and barriers broken and riven. As revived in a sestina, hell grant soon we hear again the swords clash, and the shrill neighs of destriers in battle rejoicing, spiked breast to spiked breast opposing. With what physical depths the tide of Renaissance endows that fabled stour, Altdorfer's Alexander, Janequin's Battle of Marignan, both of 1529.
Da-di-da-di-da-di-da-di-da-di.
The battles of Bible and myth yield to Titian's Charles V at the actual victory of Mühlberg, yet he holds the mythic stance, Othello's pride, pomp, and circumstance of glorious war, which Baroque and even Napoleonic heroes would cling to. It is almost the lusty make-believe of Pantagruel against the Dipsodes, how Panurge and 3 others vanquished and discomfited 603 horsemen very cunningly, winding them in with ship's cables to a trap of gunpowder. What buoys up the make-believe is the expanding giant reality of man and world. Magellan had just rounded that globe. Copernicus had set it revolving in planetary space. To an always mounting blazon of art and music, this Wheeler Ricercare, even those inadequate kings who stride the curved horizon, play Shakespearean hero roles. Methinks it were an easy leap to pluck bright honor from the pale-faced moon. In Patinia, the rounded Magellanic margin first stretches a Bosch dream, Chiron ferrying a soul toward a fiery shore. The boldest pre-Columbian prophecy, in Pulci's Morgante 1482, is communicated by a fiend, Astarote. Hung among the stars by God's mystery, the world has everywhere the form of a wheel, and as it draws all things to its center, you can sail beyond the gates of Hercules and come at last to the other hemisphere with castles and kingdoms unknown to us here. So the Altdorfer we have seen, and by 1558 Bruegel's Fall of Icarus, where the widening earth, the galleon traffic of the sea, leaves the old myth only a few plumes, a drowning flash of legs, white feathers the gulf claims. Though if Icarus is so discounted, the global flight goes on. Thus 2 printed maps, Germanus from 1487, the Eurasian landmass, with Africa to the Cape of Good Hope, filled in with the names Dias had just given, the hemisphere of water unknown, and from 1550 Deschelier, the Mercator projection, but for Australia and parts of Asia, almost as we would draw it today. And where for centuries Buddhist guardian daimons had warned venturing aliens from sacred shrines, as this Vajrapani in the Todaiji temple of Nara, Japan. Suddenly mission schools were teaching Christianity and the Western arts. Did lute romances even there sound the new grandeur of man, Milan's Durandarte? At the heart of the unyielding fastness of Russia, the Kremlin, this 1509 Cathedral of Michael, on an otherwise Byzantine Mass, displays the scallop shells of Italy, as from Brunelleschi's lantern on the dome of Florence. At the same time, Russian chant took the passion for Roman harmony, which would end with the Cossacks swelling the Psalms of David for the audiences of America. Though in the church militant icon of the time of Ivan, the force already flowing from Venice just stirs the surface, or perhaps the depths, of what Henry Adams would still call that Eastern vis inertia. In Spanish Inquisition Flanders, Bruegel had advanced from the early Icarus to the stupendous landscapes of the months, this gloomy day, from which the ultimate stormscapes of Rubens would take their cue. In English, the mightiest poem from the same time is Sackville's Induction. The wrathful winter approaching on apace, with blustering blasts had all y-baird